My wife, Claire, had a good heart. She sponsored a disadvantaged college student from Appalachia. I was all for it, right up until the day I came home early from a business trip and found the kid wearing my silk robe, lounging on my bed in the master bedroom. My wife was in the en-suite bathroom, the shower running. When he saw me, he didn't show a flicker of panic. Instead, a smug, defiant smirk spread across his face. "Hey man," he said, his voice oozing condescension. "Claire said you weren't treating her right. She needed someone to comfort her." I said nothing. I just quietly closed the door and walked away. Half an hour later, I knocked on that same door, this time with 2 SFPD officers and the boy's academic advisor from Stanford. When the door clicked open again, my wife, Claire, was wrapped in a towel, her face a mask of bewildered shock. The kid, a boy named Leo Vance, was still half reclined on the bed, but the arrogant smirk had frozen, cracking into horrified disbelief. His advisor, a man in his 40s named Mr. Davis, stared at the scene, his face turning the color of a ripe tomato. The finger he pointed at Leo trembled. "Leo, what in God's name are you doing here?" My expression was a blank slate, my voice as steady as if I were reporting on a stranger's misfortune. "Mr. Davis, thank you for coming on such short notice. This is the situation. I returned from a business trip at 8 p.m. to find this student, Leo Vance, wearing my robe in my bedroom. And my wife. I suspect she's not in her right mind. I think she may have been drugged." Claire finally snapped out of her stupor. She let out a shriek, clutching the towel tighter, her eyes burning with a rage and humiliation directed entirely at me. "Caleb, are you insane? What are you talking about?" I ignored her, addressing the officers directly. "Gentlemen, my wife is clearly in an agitated state, likely from the trauma. I request that you take Mr. Vance to the station for questioning. I would also like my wife to be examined at a hospital for any foreign substances in her system." Leo was in a full-blown panic now. He leaped off the bed, sputtering nonsense. "No, I didn't do anything. It's not what you think. It was her. Claire asked me to come over." At the sound of his words, Claire's face went chalk white. Having this boy use her first name so intimately in front of police and her student's advisor, and state that she had invited him, was a public execution. I timed my next move perfectly, stepping forward to shield Claire's trembling body, adopting the posture of a protector. My voice was laced with repressed fury and pain. "That's enough. You piece of garbage. You're still trying to slander my wife? Mr. Davis, is this the kind of high-achieving, scholarship student your university produces? Is this how he repays my wife and me for our generosity?" Mr. Davis looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "Mr. Thorne, I am so sorry, so deeply sorry," he stammered, almost bowing. "This is a failure of the university's oversight." An officer cut him off. Protocol was protocol. The older of the 2 policemen put a hand on my shoulder. "Mr. Thorne, try to stay calm. We'll take him downtown and get to the bottom of this. We'll also need you and your wife to come down later to give a formal statement." Without further argument, they hauled away the still shouting Leo. The front door closed, shutting out the chaos. The world fell silent, leaving only Claire and me. She stared at me, her eyes a complex storm of shame, resentment, and a flicker of fear she couldn't quite hide. "Caleb, what the hell are you trying to do?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "What good does it do you to blow this up? My reputation, our family's reputation. You've destroyed it." I looked at her, this woman I had loved for 7 years, the woman I once thought I'd spend my life with. She was still beautiful, but now, to me, she was like a priceless porcelain vase with a spiderweb of cracks running through it. Reputation? I let out a cold, sharp laugh. Our reputation was shattered the moment I opened that door and saw him in my bed. "You're the one who ground it into the dust with your heel, Claire. I'm just picking up the pieces, washing them off, and letting everyone see exactly who got them dirty. You called the cops to get back at me, didn't you? To ruin my life?" "No." I shook my head, walking to the bar cart. I poured myself a whiskey, the clink of ice against the crystal glass unnaturally loud in the silence. I downed it in one go, the burn in my throat a welcome shock that cleared my chaotic mind. "I called the cops to protect you." Claire stared, stunned. I turned back to face her, locking my eyes on hers. I spoke each word with deliberate, chilling precision. "At least, in the eyes of the law and the public, you are the victim, a woman who was preyed upon, perhaps even drugged by a manipulative student. You're not an adulteress who brought her boy toy into our home. So, Claire, you should thank me. I just saved you what little dignity you had left." Her body swayed. Her lips parted, but no words came out. "Now, I added calmly, you should probably start thinking about what you're going to say in your statement. Remember, from the moment I called 911, we are the victims united on the same side. Your only enemy is Leo Vance. Without another glance at her, I walked into my study and locked the door. I knew this night was only the beginning. The call to war had been sounded, and I, Caleb Thorne, had just blown the trumpet myself. As a top litigator specializing in corporate law and intellectual property, my greatest skill was dragging my enemies onto a battlefield of my own design and using the rules of the game to dismantle them, piece by piece. Our marriage had once been the gold standard in our circle of friends. I, Caleb Thorne, had gone from an unknown law school grad to a senior partner at one of San Francisco's top firms by the age of 29, all through sheer grit and a relentless drive. I'd carved out my own empire in a city that demanded a pound of flesh for every square inch. Claire Sterling was the only daughter of a wealthy local family, raised like a princess. She'd studied art history at Berkeley and carried an ethereal air, as if untouched by the mundane struggles of the world. We met at a gallery opening in Sausalito, and, for me, it was instantaneous. I pursued her for a year. Flowers, gifts, surprise trips to Napa, every romantic cliché in the book. My friends thought I'd lost my mind. A ruthless, cutthroat attorney in the courtroom, acting like a love-struck college kid. But I thought it was worth it. Claire was the embodiment of everything I'd ever wanted in a wife, a family. We were married for 5 years, and I kept her on that pedestal. She didn't have to work. Her days were a curated carousel of gallery openings, yoga retreats, and charity luncheons with her friends. I never let her worry about money. Whatever luxury she desired, I bought without a second thought. I thought this was happiness. A year ago, at a charity gala, Claire learned about a one-on-one sponsorship program for disadvantaged university students. She was deeply moved. Caleb, she'd said later that night, curled up against me, her eyes shining. I want to sponsor a student. Think of it as good karma for us. I always supported her kindness. I smiled. Of course, my money is your money. Do whatever makes you happy. And so, through a well-respected foundation, Leo Vance entered our lives. He came from a small, struggling town in West Virginia, the valedictorian of his high school, and had gotten into Stanford's elite computer science program. In his photo, he was lanky and dark-haired, with a stubborn, defiant look in his eyes that I mistook for ambition. Claire's nurturing instincts went into overdrive. She didn't just cover his tuition and living expenses. She often had him over for dinner, fussing over him, making sure he had everything he needed. At first, I didn't mind. I thought it was good for Claire to have someone to dote on. My work schedule was brutal, with frequent travel, and she was often alone. Leo's arrival filled a void, playing the part of an adoring younger brother, or perhaps a worshipful son, which seemed to satisfy a deep emotional need for her. Leo played his part beautifully. He was charming, always quick with a compliment that made Claire beam. He'd help our housekeeper clear the table and was always deferential to me. Mr. Thorne, showing the perfect blend of gratitude and respect. I even liked the kid. I'd thought about offering him an introduction at a friend's tech firm after graduation, giving him a head start. I, who prided myself on reading people, never imagined how dark and deep the currents of a human heart could run. The warning signs were there, of course, but I was blinded by work and the comfortable illusion of a happy life. Claire started complaining more. Caleb, we haven't had a weekend in Napa for a month. Caleb, you postponed our Aspen trip again for that case. Caleb, do you just not care about trying anymore now that we're married? At the same time, she mentioned Leo more and more. Leo made the dean's list again. He's so brilliant. Leo spent all afternoon helping me pick out a piece for the gallery, and he wasn't bored at all. Not like you. Leo said I'm the most beautiful, kindest woman he's ever met. I dismissed it as normal marital friction, the usual complaints. I even blamed myself, thinking I really should be spending more time with her. Looking back, it wasn't complaining. It was comparing. When a woman starts measuring you against another man, and you constantly come up short, her heart has already moved on. And I, the brilliant husband, was still burning the midnight oil, trying to build an even better future for her. What a joke. The most telling sign came right before this last business trip. For the first time, Claire didn't pout or beg me to come home soon. She just quietly packed my suitcase and told me to take care of myself. I actually felt a sense of relief, thinking she was finally becoming more understanding, more mature. I see it clearly now. It wasn't understanding. It was that she couldn't wait for me to leave. My absence was the curtain rising on her own private show. That night, I didn't sleep. From my study window, the lights of San Francisco glittered across the bay, a million points of light, and not one of them felt like it was shining for me. My home had become a cold, silent battlefield. The next day, a call came from the precinct asking Claire and me to come in and give our statements. On the drive downtown, Claire was silent, her face as white as a sheet of paper. I kept my eyes on the road, my voice flat as I broke the silence. Have you figured out what you're going to say? Her body flinched. She turned to look at me. Remember what I told you yesterday? I said, my tone devoid of any emotion. You were deceived by Leo. You might have even been drugged. He came to the house under the pretext of discussing his coursework and thanking you. When he realized I was gone, he took advantage. You resisted the entire time, but you were overpowered and disoriented. And I am the husband who came home just in time to save you. Claire's lips trembled. Caleb, do we have to do this? This is perjury. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, my eyes like chips of ice. Claire, this isn't the time for a legal debate. You have two choices. You either stick to my story, where we are the victims, or you tell the police the truth, that you two were willing participants caught in the act. In that scenario, you're an adulterer, and he's a predator who seduced his benefactor's wife. Who do you think comes out of that looking worse? I paused, lowering my voice. And don't forget, your father values a sterling family name above all else. You don't want him to find out his perfect daughter is capable of something this shameless, do you? That was the dagger, and it struck her right where she was most vulnerable. The Sterlings, for all their wealth, were intensely private and old-fashioned. Her father, a man who would rather lose a fortune than face a public scandal, would be merciless. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they held nothing but desolate surrender. I know what to say. At the station, everything played out according to my script. Claire, drawing on the imaginative flair she'd honed as an art history major, delivered an Oscar-worthy performance, painting herself as an innocent, kind-hearted woman targeted by a monster. Her story dovetailed perfectly with my initial report. Leo's situation, however, was deteriorating rapidly. To distance the university from the scandal, Mr. Davis had already labeled him a student who had betrayed the trust of the institution and his sponsors, demonstrating a profound lack of moral character. Under questioning, Leo insisted it was consensual, but his words were flimsy and weak against the tearful testimony of a victim and the righteous anger of a cuckolded husband. Especially my testimony. As a lawyer, I knew how to frame a narrative, how to present facts in their most favorable light. I gave the police a detailed account of our sponsorship of Leo, casually providing bank records of every transfer we'd ever made, down to the last cent. We treated him like our own son, officer, I said, my voice heavy with sorrow. My wife especially, her heart broke for him, a kid from the mountains trying to make it. His food, his clothes, we gave him the best of everything. We never imagined we were harboring a wolf in sheep's clothing. Faced with overwhelming evidence of our kindness, Leo's story of a consensual affair sounded more like a desperate attempt to slander his victim to save his own skin. In the end, the detective told me what I already knew. Since Claire's medical exam showed no conclusive evidence of drugs and there were no signs of a physical struggle, the DA would not be able to press felony charges for sexual assault. My goal was never to send him to prison. A few years behind bars and he'd be out, still young. I wanted something more thorough. I wanted to destroy his soul. I understand, I said to the detective, playing the part of a reasonable man. But the emotional and psychological damage to my wife is very real, and I trust that beyond the law, there are university codes of conduct, and there is morality. I walked out of the police station with Claire, holding the document stating the DA was declining to prosecute. In the bright sunlight, her face was still ghostly pale. Is it over? She whispered. No, I said, opening the car door for her. It's just beginning. Back home, the first thing I did was accidentally let the story slip to one of Claire's closest friends, a notorious gossip. In their world, secrets traveled faster than fiber optics. Within 3 days, the entire high society circle of San Francisco would know the story. Claire Sterling, the ethereal princess of the Sterling family, was nearly assaulted by the poor student she'd so generously sponsored. Her heroic husband, Caleb, came home just in time to save her. In this version of the story, Claire was the victim. I was the hero, and Leo was the ungrateful, social climbing villain who resorted to despicable means. This was the narrative I wanted. I wanted public opinion to be his judge, jury, and executioner. As for Claire, did she really think she would walk away unscathed? How naive. A week later, Stanford's disciplinary board placed Leo Vance on indefinite academic suspension pending a formal conduct review. For a star student at a top-tier university, this was a death sentence for his future. Graduate school, internships, a career in Silicon Valley, all of it gone. I thought he would retreat, but he did something I hadn't anticipated. He started desperately trying to contact Claire. And Claire, impossibly, replied. I saw it all. The day I got back from the police station, I had security cameras installed, citing our safety. I put them in the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, all public areas, perfectly legal. I watched her on the monitor, sitting in my study, using a burner phone to exchange messages with Leo. Leo, Claire, why did you lie? Why did you side with him against me? Claire, Leo, I'm sorry. I had no choice. Leo, my life is ruined. Everyone at Stanford looks at me like I'm a monster. I'm finished. This is all because of you. Because of him. Claire, just calm down. I'll find a way to make it up to you. Leo, make it up to me? How? Unless you leave that bastard and be with me. Reading that, I almost laughed out loud. This kid was not only greedy, he was stupid. He actually thought he still had leverage over her. But what truly shocked me was Claire's reply. Claire, give me some time. Those 4 words were a poisoned blade twisting in my heart. So, it wasn't just pity and misplaced affection. She was actually considering it. Fine. Wonderful. If your love is that epic, who am I, the villain, to stand in the way of a happy ending? I screenshotted the entire conversation and saved it. Then, I began to set my plan's second phase in motion. Claire began to cautiously broach the subject of divorce. She chose an evening when I had just closed a major case and seemed to be in a good mood. She cooked dinner herself, pan-seared steak, roasted asparagus, things I liked, and opened a bottle of Cabernet. The candlelight flickered, the atmosphere perfectly staged for intimacy. Caleb, she began, pouring me a glass of wine, her voice as soft as silk. You've been working so hard lately. I looked at her, knowing the main act was about to begin. It's what we do, right? I played along. She was quiet for a moment, then let out a theatrical sigh. Caleb, I think there's something wrong with us. After what happened with Leo, I just have this knot in my stomach. When I look at you, all I can think about is the terror of that night. I think I need some time and some space. A brilliant move, framing her retreat as a symptom of trauma. She was positioning herself as the victim, using PTSD as a justifiable reason for her coldness. What kind of space are you talking about? I asked. Maybe we could separate for a while, she said, watching me carefully. Or, if you think that would be too painful, perhaps. Divorce would be a relief for both of us. I looked at her piteous expression and felt a wave of nausea, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I put on a mask of anguish and conflict. Claire, are you serious? After all these years? It's because of all these years that I don't want us to end up hating each other, she said, her voice dripping with sincerity. I considered it for a long moment before giving a heavy, defeated nod. All right, if this is the relief you need, I won't stand in your way. And don't worry about the finances. Aside from this house being in my name, you can have half of all our marital assets. A flicker of unmistakable relief crossed her face. She probably thought I was a love-struck fool, a cash machine who knew how to make money but not how to protect it. Oh, Caleb, you're a good man, she whispered, her eyes welling up with crocodile tears. But, I said, changing my tone, I have one condition. What is it? I want this to be amicable. No drama. To that end, regarding the Leo situation, I need a written statement from you. I look her directly in the eye. I want you to write, in your own hand, that you and Leo were never involved. That the police report was a misunderstanding, born out of my own fear and jealousy. Will you do that for me? Claire's expression shifted. She wasn't an idiot. She knew what that statement meant. It would completely contradict her police testimony, admitting she'd filed a false report. Even though charges weren't pressed, a signed confession in my hands was a powerful weapon. Why? Why would you need that? She asked. Because I need security, too, I said with a bitter smile. I'm afraid one day you'll change your mind, or Leo will convince you to come after me for defamation. Claire, I'm giving you your freedom and half of everything we've built. All I'm asking for in return is peace of mind. That seems fair, doesn't it? My logic was airtight. A heartbroken husband, abandoned by his wife, wanting to protect himself from future litigation. It was perfectly reasonable. Claire hesitated for a long time, but the allure of money and freedom, and the man she wanted to share it with, was stronger than her caution. Okay, she said, her jaw set. I'll write it. I watched as she sat down in my study and, word by word, wrote out the statement. She wrote that she and Leo were innocent. She wrote that she forgave my overreaction. She signed her name and pressed her thumbprint onto the paper. I took the document, reviewed it carefully, and then locked it in my safe. There, I said, standing up, a smile of relief on my face. We can file the papers tomorrow. Claire probably thought her new life was about to begin. She and her boy toy could take my money and ride off into the sunset. She had no idea that the moment she signed that paper, she had already lost everything. That statement, combined with the screenshots of her texts with Leo, formed a perfect chain of evidence. A chain of evidence that would prove her adultery and perjury so conclusively that in a divorce court, she would walk away with absolutely nothing. Caleb Thorne, never make a bad investment. Why give? I always expect to get back with interest. The day before Claire and I were scheduled to sign the divorce papers, the script flipped. Suddenly, Claire was refusing to go. Instead, I was served with a letter from her attorney. I read the aggressively worded document and had to stop myself from laughing out loud. In the letter, Claire was painted as a long-suffering wife, a victim of my coercive control and emotional abuse. She accused me of being cold and distant, and worse, of forcing her against her will to file a police report in the Leo Vance incident purely to save my own ego, causing her immense psychological trauma and damage to her reputation. Therefore, she was demanding a divorce. Not an amicable, no-fault split, but a contentious lawsuit. Her requested settlement was no longer the 50% I had offered, but 70% of all marital assets. On top of that, she demanded $3 million in damages for emotional distress. The real kicker? The lawyer she had hired was my old nemesis, Marcus Shaw. Shaw started his career the same year I did and had been living in my shadow ever since. We'd faced off in court numerous times, and he'd lost more than he'd won. He hated my guts. I knew instantly. This wasn't Claire's idea. She didn't have the sophistication for a move like this. Someone was pulling her strings. And it wasn't that idiot Leo. It had to be Shaw. I called her. "What is this?" I asked, dispensing with pleasantries. The woman on the other end of the line was not the soft-spoken, timid Claire I knew. Her voice was brittle, confident, and tinged with the sweet taste of revenge. "It's exactly what it looks like, Caleb. I spoke with Marcus. He said that given my situation, I'm entitled to much more. You always said I was naive, that I didn't understand how the world works. Well, let's see who understands it now. Who gave you this courage? Shaw? Leo? That's not important," she sneered. "What's important, Caleb, is that I'm not your doll anymore. I'll see you in court." She hung up. I stood there holding my phone, and for the first time felt a prickle of unease, a sense that things were slipping from my control. Claire's transformation was too abrupt. It was as if someone had uploaded entirely new software into her brain, rewriting her entire operating system. Something had happened that I didn't know about. I immediately called my private investigator, Frank. I told him to find out everything about Claire's recent meetings with Marcus Shaw and, specifically, what role Leo Vance played in all of this. Frank called back that afternoon. "Caleb, you were right. The kid, Leo, is involved. But he's not the mastermind. He's more like the price of admission." "What does that mean?" I frowned. "Claire and Shaw met a week ago, and you're not going to believe who set up the meeting." Frank paused for dramatic effect. "Spit it out, Frank." "Her father, Robert Sterling." The name hit me like a physical blow. Robert Sterling? My father-in-law. The man who valued his reputation over anything? Why would he get involved? And why would he side with Claire to come after me? It made no sense. You should have been the one most desperate to keep this scandal quiet. "Caleb," Frank continued, "I dug up something interesting. Last year, Shaw's firm handled a major bankruptcy restructuring for a construction supply company, pulled it back from the brink. And one of the primary investors in that company was Robert Sterling." It clicked. Shaw and Sterling already had a financial relationship. "There's more," Frank said. "When Claire met with Shaw, she brought Leo with her. Then, 2 days ago, Leo Vance officially withdrew from Stanford. He finished the paperwork yesterday and was on a plane out of SFO this morning. Destination unknown. He dropped out? At this critical moment, he just vanished. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. This was a conspiracy. Claire, her father, Shaw, and Leo. They had formed a new alliance, and I was their common enemy. The only way Claire could have become this aggressive was if she'd gotten her hands on some kind of trump card, something she thought could not only counter me, but crush me. What could it be? Evidence of me cheating? Impossible. I was obsessively discreet. Financial misconduct? As a lawyer, my books were immaculate. What was it? I replayed every event, every conversation, searching for the detail I'd missed. Suddenly, a thought struck me like lightning. I strode to my study and opened the safe where I kept Claire's signed confession. The paper was still there, the ink clear. That wasn't it. I remembered something else. When I first demanded she write the statement, she had said something specific. She'd said, This is perjury. How would an art history major, a woman who lived in a world of museums and charity balls, use a precise legal term like perjury so easily, unless someone had already coached her? On the night she asked for a divorce, her demeanor was soft, pleading. It was only after I brought up the condition of the signed statement that she became hesitant and wary. It all made sense. She had already consulted a lawyer before she ever came to me. Not Shaw. Someone else, perhaps. Or Shaw himself from the beginning. Her asking for a divorce was a trap. She played the part of the weak, traumatized wife, agreeing to my terms, all to lure me into demanding she write that statement. The very weapon I thought I was forging was, in fact, the centerpiece of her trap. They didn't want the statement itself. They wanted the process of me forcing her to write it. I frantically searched the study. Tucked behind a leather-bound edition of War and Peace on the bookshelf, I found it, a tiny digital audio recorder. It wasn't mine. My hand trembled as I pressed play. The conversation from that night filled the silent room. Her soft Caleb, my calm, methodical voice laying out the terms, her reluctant agreement. Everything, my own voice echoed back at me, sounding like a monster, a cold-blooded attorney using financial leverage to coerce his wife into committing a felony. A brilliant countermove. I thought I was the hunter, but I had walked right into their snare. In court, Shaw would play this recording. He would tell the judge that I, Caleb Thorne, a senior partner at a prestigious firm, knowingly broke the law, suborning perjury to cover up my abuse and slander. He would paint Claire as a terrified woman, so broken by my controlling behavior that she had to play along to survive. My act of calling the police on Leo would be reframed as a malicious attempt to frame an innocent young man to hide my own sins. Public opinion, morality, the law. They were coming for me from every angle, aiming for total annihilation. I sank into my chair and closed my eyes, an arctic cold seeping into my bones. Had I lost? No, not yet. I slowly opened my eyes. There was no panic left, only the chilling calm that follows white-hot rage. Claire, Robert Sterling, Marcus Shaw. You think this is how you win? You have no idea who you're dealing with. You've written a great script, but now it's my turn to direct the finale. And I promise you, it will be unforgettable. The first thing I did was turn the investigation back on Leo Vance. Now that he had dropped out of Stanford and left town, he was no longer just a rival for my wife's affection. He was a liability, a hidden weapon they planned to use against me. Sterling and Shaw had made him disappear to make whatever testimony he gave seem more credible, or perhaps to keep him quiet. I needed to know who he really was. Was he truly the poor boy from the mountains? I gave the job to Frank. Dig into his past. I ordered, my voice cold. I want everything, from his birth certificate to his high school transcripts. Family, friends, any whisper scandal. Money is no object. I want the unvarnished truth. You got it, Frank said, sensing the gravity. You got to work immediately. Meanwhile, I began preparing for the divorce trial. If they wanted a war, I would give them one. I compiled a complete list of our marital assets, receipts for every major purchase, reports on every investment. I even dug up the archives of my old text messages from when I was courting Claire, along with records of every gift I'd ever given her. I would show the court how I had loved this woman, and I would show them how she had repaid me. I also made several encrypted backups of the security camera footage showing Claire communicating with Leo. I knew Shaw would challenge the legality of the videos, claiming they were an invasion of privacy. That was fine. The videos weren't meant for the judge. They were meant for someone else. 3 days later, Frank called. His voice was electric with a barely suppressed excitement. Caleb, you're not going to believe what I found. Talk to me. This Leo Vance kid, he's no charity case from Appalachia. His family is new money, one of the richest in their county. My grip on the phone tightened. Explain. His father's name is Rick Vance. Made a fortune in coal mining years ago, then came back home and started a bunch of local businesses. He's not on the Forbes list, but in his corner of West Virginia, he's a king. They live in a 3-story McMansion, drive a new Mercedes G-Wagon. I saw a picture of his mom wearing an emerald bracelet that could pay for 4 years at Stanford. Then why the act? I asked, cutting to the chase. That's the genius of it, Frank said with a low chuckle. I talked to some of his old high school teachers. The kid was always smart, but more than that, he was cunning. His grades were good enough to get into Stanford, but not quite good enough for the elite computer science program he wanted. But Stanford has a special admissions initiative for high-achieving students from designated, economically distressed counties in Appalachia. It gave them a leg up. My blood ran cold, and his county wasn't one of them. Not even close. They got off that list years ago, but his parents paid someone off, got a whole set of forged documents, fake tax returns, residency papers, the works. With that fake profile, he not only got the admissions bump into the best program, he also qualified for financial aid, scholarships, and, of course, private sponsorships from suckers like you. Frank sighed. The kid's a brilliant con artist. He's been playing everyone. taking your money, living it up, and probably laughing his ass off at you the entire time. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The truth was uglier and more depraved than I could have imagined. This wasn't a simple affair. It was a long con, a meticulously planned fraud from the very beginning. Leo's goal wasn't just my wife or my money. He was using us as a stepping stone to launch himself into a different world. And Claire, my foolish, self-absorbed wife, was his perfect launch pad. But what about Robert Sterling? A shark like him wouldn't be fooled by a small-time grifter like Leo. He had to know. The only reason he would embrace Leo, even use him as a pawn against me, was if Leo held something over him or offered him something he couldn't refuse. I looked again at the file Frank had sent me. In the list of Leo's high school classmates, a familiar name jumped out at me. Jenna. I remembered her. She was one of Claire's best friends from college. They'd stayed close after graduation. And Jenna's hometown was the same small county in West Virginia as Leo Vance. A hazy connection in my mind suddenly sharpened into a clear, terrifying line. I dialed Jenna's number. Jenna, it's Caleb Thorne. She sounded startled. Caleb, why are you calling me? I want to ask you about someone. Leo Vance. He's from your hometown. Do you know him? There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice was strained. I know of him. We weren't really friends. What? You've heard about what happened with him and Claire, I assume? I didn't beat around the bush. Yes, I heard. Poor Claire. To be taken in by a wolf like that. Is that what happened? I asked, a hint of ice in my voice. I don't think it's that simple. Jenna, you and I have been friends for years. I need you to tell me the truth. When did Claire meet Leo? Was it really at that charity gala? The silence on the other end of the line stretched on. Just as I thought she was going to hang up, her voice came back, barely a whisper. No, when? It was 3 years ago. Jenna's voice trembled. 3 years ago, Claire came to my wedding back home. Leo was one of the groomsmen. They met then. It felt as if all the blood in my body had turned to ice. 3 years. Not one. All this time, I thought the betrayal began a year ago at a charity event. But they had known each other long before that. Caleb, Jenna's voice was thick with tears. I'm so sorry. I never told you. Claire made me promise not to. She said it was nothing, that he was just a kid from back home she'd had a conversation with. I never dreamed it would turn into this. I didn't have the energy to be angry with Jenna. All I could feel was the weight of a far more horrifying truth crashing down on me. Claire's sponsorship of Leo wasn't an act of charity. It was a premeditated plot. She had found a man she already knew, a man with whom she may have already been involved, and brought him into our lives, into our home, under my very nose by painting him as a charity case. And I, the fool, had applauded her generosity. I worked myself to the bone to provide for our family, while my wife used my money to support her lover. They were in my house, maybe even in my bed, laughing at my ignorance. The room spun. I grabbed my desk to steady myself. A volcano of rage and humiliation erupted in my chest, threatening to consume me. But just as quickly, the white-hot fury cooled into something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Claire, Leo, Robert Sterling, Marcus Shaw. They had formed a vile alliance to drag me down into the mud. They thought they had won, but they had forgotten one crucial thing. When you push a good man to the edge, he becomes something far worse than a monster. The game was just beginning. The day of the hearing arrived. Claire and I sat at opposing tables, a chasm of hostility between us. Her face was a mask of smug confidence. Beside her, Marcus Shaw looked like a cat who'd gotten the cream. I was alone. I hadn't hired counsel. I was my own best counsel. The courtroom was tense. Shaw stood and began his performance. He submitted the audio recorder as evidence, his voice dripping with false empathy as he described how I had coerced my traumatized wife into committing perjury. He then called several of Claire's friends to the stand, who testified that I was a cold, work-obsessed husband, hinting at controlling behaviors. The narrative was clear. Claire was the victim, and I was the villain. I sat and listened, offering no objections, no interruptions. When Shaw had finally rested his case, the judge turned to me. Mr. Thorne, does the respondent have anything to present? I stood, straightened my tie, and walked to the center of the courtroom. Your Honor, my voice was calm, but carried to every corner of the room. In response to all the plaintiff's allegations, I have only one thing to say. They are lies. Shaw shot to his feet. Objection. The respondent is making ad hominem attacks. The judge's gavel came down. Overruled. Mr. Thorne, proceed with your evidence. Thank you, Your Honor. The first thing I presented wasn't a video or a recording. It was a document. This is the official disciplinary letter from Stanford University regarding Leo Vance. It states in black and white that he was suspended for gross misconduct resulting in a deleterious impact on the university community. I asked the court, how credible is the word of a man with such a documented character? Then, I turned my attention to Claire. Claire, you claim I forced you to file a false report against Leo, causing you severe emotional distress. If that's the case, and if your relationship was, as your attorney implies, consensual, then why did you continue to communicate with your abuser after the fact? With that, I submitted my first key piece of evidence, the screenshots of the text messages between Claire and Leo, taken from my home security system. When the intimate, conspiratorial messages flashed onto the courtroom's main display, a wave of murmurs swept through the gallery. Claire's face drained of all color. Shaw, clearly blindsided, leaped up again, arguing that the evidence was obtained illegally, a violation of privacy. Your Honor, I responded coolly. First, the cameras were installed in common areas of my own home, which is perfectly legal. Second, this conversation took place after my wife had claimed to be a victim of assault. This proves that while presenting herself as a victim, she was maintaining a close, romantic correspondence with her alleged attacker. Wouldn't the court agree that's a contradiction? I didn't give them a moment to recover. I moved to my second point. Claire, in your petition, you state that you were deeply unhappy in our marriage. If so, can you please explain why, 3 years ago when my career was just taking off and our finances were still tight, you transferred $50,000 to your friend Jenna, claiming it was a loan to help her pay for her lavish wedding? Claire froze, stunned that I would bring this up. In the gallery, Jenna looked like she was about to be sick. Because she's my best friend. Claire stammered. Is she? I asked with a cold smile. Because my records show that Jenna's husband's family is extremely wealthy. They certainly didn't need your $50,000 to help out with the wedding. I submitted financial records proving my point. So where did that money go, Claire? Or was it never for Jenna at all? I turned my gaze to the gallery, my eyes locking onto Jenna. Ms. Miller, I said, using her married name. As a potential witness, you are aware that lying to the court is a serious offense. Can you state, for the record, that you received that $50,000 transfer? Under my intense stare, Jenna's composure crumbled. She burst into tears. No, I never got it. It was Claire. She asked me to lie for her. She said she needed the money for something urgent and had to hide it from you. The money. She gave it to a man. The courtroom erupted. Claire swayed on her feet, glaring at me with a look of pure hatred. But I wasn't done. It was time for my final, fatal blow. Your Honor, my wife didn't concoct this elaborate scheme because our marriage had failed. She did it because she and her accomplices have been engaged in a despicable, long-term fraud from the very beginning. I submitted Frank's entire investigation file, the evidence of Leo's wealthy background, the forged financial aid documents, the proof of the admissions fraud he'd committed against Stanford. This so-called disadvantaged student, Leo Vance, is the son of a multi-millionaire developer. He is a fraudster who cheated the university, cheated the federal government, and cheated me. I paused, my eyes sweeping over the ashen faces of Claire and Shaw. And my wife, Claire, was she an unknowing victim in this? No, she was a co-conspirator. She knew Leo Vance 3 years ago, meeting him through her friend Jenna. Her sponsorship was a lie, a cover to bring a man she already knew into our lives, using my money to fund her affair. And one has to wonder about the involvement of her esteemed father, Robert Sterling. I raised my voice, letting the accusation hang in the air. Why else would he bring in a high-powered attorney like Marcus Shaw to help his daughter and this con artist attack me, the actual victim? What sort of backroom deal was struck to facilitate this conspiracy? My words echoed through the silent courtroom. With every sentence, the color drained further from Claire's face. Shaw was paralyzed, staring at the mountain of evidence I'd produced, sweat beading on his forehead. He knew it was over. He had been utterly, humiliatingly defeated. And Claire, she looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not hatred, but pure, unadulterated fear. She finally understood the kind of man she had provoked. She had set a trap, but I had returned from the abyss and dug a grave deep enough for all of them. The judge declared a recess. I knew I had already won. As I walked out of the courthouse, the sun was blinding. Robert Sterling was waiting for me by the doors. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. Caleb, he said, his voice a dry rasp. We should talk. I looked at him and smiled. A little late for that, don't you think? The moment your daughter chose to take this to court, there was nothing left for us to talk about. I walked past him without a backward glance. The final judgment was no surprise. The court found Claire to be the party at fault, citing extreme marital misconduct and a clear intent to maliciously conceal and conspire to misappropriate marital assets. The divorce was granted. As the wrong party, I was awarded 90% of our shared property. Claire walked away with next to nothing. Not only did she fail to get a dime from me, but she and her true love became a cautionary tale, the butt of jokes in the very social circles she once dominated. The Sterling princess had been summarily dethroned. But that was just the beginning. An anonymous tip led the Department of Education and the IRS to launch a full-scale investigation into Leo Vance's fraudulent student status. The matter escalated from simple university conduct issue to federal fraud. The investigation was swift and brutal. Leo and his clever father, Rick Vance, were indicted. Not only did they have to repay all the financial aid, but they also faced prison time. The inquiry unearthed the shadier aspects of Rick's business empire. The Vance family dream was over. Cold iron bars were in their future. The network of local officials who had helped forge their documents was swept up in a parallel corruption probe. Marcus Shaw, for advising his client to commit perjury and for his ethically dubious dealings with Robert Sterling, was disbarred. His career was over. As for Robert Sterling, to save his company and his own skin, he made the calculated decision to cut his losses. He issued a public statement disowning his daughter and offering me a formal apology. But the damage was done. Investors pulled out, his company's stock plummeted, and the Sterling empire began to crumble. In less than a month, I had systematically crushed the entire alliance that had betrayed me. I hadn't used my fists or raised my voice. I had used the law, the rules, and a deep understanding of human nature. I took away the things they valued most: Claire's pride, Leo's future, Shaw's career, and Sterling's reputation. It was a punishment far more painful than simple revenge. One day, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Claire. Her voice was hollow, stripped of its former charm and its later venom. "Caleb, I was wrong. I was so wrong," she sobbed. "Please, let it go. Leave my father alone. I'm begging you." I listened in silence. "I did love you, Caleb," she pleaded, a desperate last attempt. "You were just. You were so busy. I was lonely. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was Leo. He kept pursuing me, telling me he could give me the passion and attention you wouldn't." "Are you finished?" I cut in, my voice flat. She stopped. "Claire," I said, my voice as cold and clear as glass, "every word you're saying right now disgusts me. You didn't love me. You loved the life I provided. And when you got bored, you went looking for a cheap thrill. You never respected me, and you never respected our marriage. Your greatest mistake wasn't cheating, and it wasn't greed," I said, articulating each word with precision. "It was overestimating yourself and underestimating me. You thought I was just a workhorse you could control, but you forgot that the same hands that put you on a pedestal could just as easily cast you down into hell. As for your father, he made a business decision. He has to live with the consequences. This is the adult world. The words, 'I'm begging you,' have no currency here. And finally, let me leave you with this. The moment I opened that bedroom door, I told myself that public opinion and the law are far better weapons than fists. It appears I was right. I ended the call and blocked her number. I never wanted to hear from her again. It was time to clean house, permanently. A few months later, I sold the house in San Francisco and my partnership stake in the firm. I took a long overdue vacation, driving east through the deserts and mountains to see the parts of the country I'd only ever flown over. I found myself at Lake Tahoe, standing by the shore, looking at the impossibly blue water against the backdrop of the Sierra Nevada. A profound sense of peace washed over me. The betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it had also shown me the truth about so many things, most of all myself. It taught me that kindness requires a spine of steel, and that you must choose who is worthy of your love. I had lost the happiness I thought I had, but I had found myself again. I took out my phone and posted a picture to my private social media account. It was a shot of the brilliant star-filled sky over the lake. I wrote a single line beneath it: "The old has gone, the new has come." A minute later, a notification popped up, a like and a comment. It was from a former client, a brilliant woman I admired who had divorced her husband and built a wildly successful tech company from the ground up. Her comment was simple: "Welcome to the new world, Mr. Thorne." I looked at her words and smiled. Yes, welcome to the new world. A world that was vast, clear, and clean. It was good to be here.